Hello, my dear students. Welcome you all to Sri Jain Rank Zone classes. I am your mentor and your friend for the subject biology, and I will be taking the zoology part, that is animal science. My dear students, in the last section, we have discussed about the appendicular skeleton, and today we are going to start with study of joints, different types of joints. So, orthology is known as study of joints. Orthology is known as study of joints. There are many articulations of joints present in the skeleton. Joint or articulation is a point of contact between bones. Joints are classified based upon their structure and the kinds of movements which they permit. There are three main types of joints. One is the fixed or immovable joint. This fixed or immovable joint is known as what? Synarthrosis. There is no joint cavity. There is no movement possible. These joints, the bones are basically filled in between the dense connective tissue, which is made up of collagen fibers. So the dense connective tissue between bones, which is made up of collagen fibers, basically is filled up in between the bones, and thereby bones, they cannot move over each other. So this type of joint is known as what? Immovable joint or synarthrosis or fixed joint. Examples are sutures. Sutures are found between skull bones. Sutures are fixed or fibrous joints. The articulating bones are held together by white fibrous tissue. So sutures, they are found between skull bones like parietal, occipital, frontal, temporal, zygomatic. Sutures are fixed or fibrous joints. They help in the articulation, and the articulating surfaces of bones are held together by white fibrous tissue. The another category is gomophosis. Gomophosis is the type of fibrous joint in which cone-shaped peg fits socket. So this is a cone-shaped peg fits socket, which is an example of canine. I mean, all the maxillary and mandibular teeth, they have thecodont dentition. I mean, their roots are embedded in a bony socket, the alveolar bone. So this bony socket is basically having a type of joint with this teeth or tooth, which is known as what? Gomophosis. So gomophosis is a type of fibrous joint, and it is an immovable or fixed joint. Synarthrosis. Syndesmosis, it is a type of fibrous joint which is more fibrous than sutures. For example, the distal end of distal articulation between tibia and fibula. So the point where tibia and fibula, they articulate with each other, it is syndesmosis. Okay. Now coming to imperfect joints or amphiarthrosis. Imperfect joints or amphiarthrosis, they are slightly movable joints, and they are known as what? Cartilaginous joints. Okay, cartilaginous joints. Joints in which synovial cavity is absent. The synovial cavity is absent in these joints. It permits a small amount of movement. The fibrocartilage is placed between the bones. They have fibrocartilage instead of dense connective tissue in case of immovable joints. So these are partially movable joints or slightly movable joints. These are cartilaginous joints. For example, pubic symphysis between the bodies of the vertebrae. Pubic symphysis, hip bone, sorry. Intervertebral disc between the bodies of the vertebrae. Intervertebral disc. Here is the example of intervertebral disc. You can see. Okay, this is amphiarthrosis or imperfect joint. So intervertebral disc is basically made up of white fibrocartilage. Pubic symphysis is also made up of white fibrocartilage. And It is also present between the manubrium and the body of sternum. Okay, manubrium and the body of sternum, and sacroiliac joint of frog. So they all are amphiarthrosis or cartilaginous joints. Okay. Then comes the synovial joints, which are freely movable joints known as perfect joints or diarthrosis. They are freely movable. The synovial cavity and ligaments are present in diarthrosis. These are typical joints having articulating surface and synovial capsule. So perfect joints or diarthrosis, they are freely movable joint and they are synovial joints. The synovial cavity and ligaments are present. Ligaments, they help to connect bone to bone. They are typical joints having articulating surface and synovial capsule. Like in this picture, this is the bone. The articular cartilage. This is the articular cartilage. This is the articular cartilage. In between, synovial fluid is there. And this is the synovial membrane. There is a fibrous capsule which is present outside the synovial membrane. Synovial fluid, it acts as a grease, it acts as a lubricant in the joint. The joints of elbow, ankle, wrist, hip, knee, they all are synovial joints. Articular cartilage covers the surface of articular bones. The articular cartilage is made up of hyaline cartilage. So articular cartilage of synovial joints is hyaline cartilage. Synovial joints are surrounded by tubular articular capsule. The synovial joints, they are basically surrounded by tubular articular capsule. The articular capsule consists of two layers. One is the outer fibrous layer, fibrous capsule, and the inner synovial membrane. The synovial joint is surrounded by tubular articular capsule. The articular capsule consists of two layers. The outer one is fibrous capsule and the inner one is synovial membrane. The synovial membrane secretes synovial fluid which lubricates and provides nourishment to the articular cartilage. The synovial membrane secretes synovial fluid which lubricates and provides nourishment to the articular cartilage. In old stage, stiffness of joint is due to decrease in synovial fluid. So the main function of synovial membrane is to secrete synovial fluid, and the main function of synovial fluid is to lubricate and provide nourishment to articular cartilage. In old ages, stiffness of joints is due to the loss of synovial fluid. So because of friction, the articular capsule or the articular cartilage gets destroyed, okay, which leads to, you know, the friction between the bones, which leads to the hindrance in the movement. Ball and socket joint. The first type of synovial joint or freely movable joint is ball and socket joint. It is also known as anarthrosis. Also known as anarthrosis. Ball of one bone articulates in the socket of another bone. Okay. So it is like this. Okay. So there is ball and socket joint. Okay. The joint between humerus and glenoid cavity of scapula. So this is the girdle, especially they have ball and socket joint, whether it is pelvic girdle or pectoral girdle. They have ball and socket joint. Okay. So pelvic girdle and pectoral girdle, they have ball and socket joint. Example, head of humerus and glenoid cavity of pectoral girdle. Okay. Femur and acetabulum of pelvic girdle. Joint between incus and stapes is also a ball and socket joint. Joint between incus and stapes is also the ball and socket joint. Okay. So this is ball and socket joint, which is a freely movable joint or synovial joint, or also known as anarthrosis. Hinge joint, also known as gingulum. Movement is possible in one direction only. Movement is possible in one direction only. Example, joint of malleus and incus. Joint of malleus and incus is a type of hinge joint, knee joint, elbow joint, articulation joint of lower jaw, joint of phalanges of digits. So hinge joint, also known as gingulum, movement is possible in one direction only, like joint of malleus and incus. Incus and stapes, they have ball and socket joint. Malleus and incus, they have hinge joint. Knee joint, elbow joint, articulation joint of lower jaw, and joint of phalanges of digits. They are the type of categories of hinge joint. Okay. Interphalangeal joint. You can see this is humerus, shaft of humerus. Okay, this is median protuberance, lateral protuberance. This is the trochlear part having trochlear notch. Okay, this trochlea is basically attached to here. Okay, this is trochlear notch. Sorry, this is the trochlear notch. This is trochlear fossa. This is ulna. This is type of hinge joint. Pivot joint. Pivot joint is basically a type of joint in which bone has peg-like process while or which allow the bone to acquire a shape of a ring, also known as rotatoria, rotatoria, and helps in turning movement. So pivot joint, it also known as rotatoria, and helps in turning movement. One bone is fixed and the second articulates. One bone is fixed and the second one articulates. The atlas and axial of skull rotate with the axis vertebrae, also known as atlantoaxial joint. So the joint between atlas and axis is a type of pivot joint. Okay. The head of radius, this is having a radial notch. This is the head of the radius, also receives the radial part of the humerus. Okay, which is towards the thumb or distal. Okay. So in the previous class, we have studied about the oligocrinal process. Okay, just I will revise for you. Give me a minute. Huh. Olin process articulates with the Olin fossa in the ulna. Coronoid process articulates with the coronoid fossa of radius. So radius is having basically the coronoid fossa. Okay. So pivot joint is in the examples are atlantoaxial joint and the joint between radius and the coronoid process of humerus. Gliding joint. The most or the maximum joint in the body is gliding joint. Also known as orthoidal joint, showing limited movement in all direction, like tarsals, bones of ankle, zygapophysis of vertebrae, radius, and ulna. So gliding joint, also known as orthoidal joint, it provides limited movement in all direction. Example: tarsals, bones of ankle, zygapophysis of vertebrae, radius, and ulna. They are gliding joint. Saddle joint, it is a ball and socket like joint but not developed fully. Example: metacarpal of thumb and carpals of head. Okay. So metacarpal of thumb and carpals of head, they have saddle joint. Okay. It is a ball and socket joint but it is not fully developed. Metacarpal of thumb and carpal of head. Condyloid joint, also known as ellipsoidal joint, also known as ellipsoidal joint, which is biaxial, where oval condyle of one bone fits into the elliptical cavity of another bone. The oval condyle of one bone fits into the elliptical cavity of another bone. Example: joint between radius and carpals at wrist. Joint between radius and carpals at wrist. So gliding joint, in which one bone slides over the other. That is why it is known for gliding joint. It is also known as orthoidal joint. It provides limited movement in all the directions. Okay. So it is between zygapophysis of vertebrae, between carpals, and between tarsals. Okay. Tarsals, carpals, okay, and zygapophysis. Ellipsoidal joint or condyloid joints. Okay. The condyle of one bone articulates with the elliptical concavity of another. The joint between radius and carpals at wrist. The joint between radius and carpals at wrist. Okay. Atlas and occipital joint. Joint between atlas and occipital. Is a type of condyloid joint. The joint between radius and carpals at wrist is also a type of condyloid joint, and the atlanto-occipital joint is also a type of condyloid joint. So these are the pictures of different other joints. Okay, like okay, is that clear? Now, now we will talk about a very important term, lever. This is effort. This is fulcrum. And this is resistance. The class 1 lever, in which fulcrum is in the middle. Okay, I will write here. Fulcrum is in middle. Okay, means between effort and load. Example: nodding of head. Class 2 lever, it provides resistance in the middle, standing on toes. Okay. Class 1 lever, class 2 lever. To it, resistance in middle, example standing on toes. The class 3 lever is effort in the middle. So in the class 1 lever, fulcrum is in the middle. In the second lever, class 2 lever, load or resistance in the middle. And the third class is class 3 lever. Is the one in which effort in middle. Flexion of forearm. The examples are flexion of forearm. Okay. Class 1 lever, class 2 lever, and class 3 lever. Now we will talk about the disorders of skeleton and joints. Sprain. Sprain refers to injury to joint capsule, typically involving a stretching or tearing of tendons or ligaments. So sprain basically refers to injury to joint capsule. It typically involves the stretching or tearing of tendons or ligaments. Unfortunately, both these structures have much poorer regenerative power than bone. I mean, bone can regenerate very quickly. Okay, but the healing in case of tear or ligament injury is delayed, and once stretch often remain weak. Okay, it becomes weak. Sprain is often considered as minor disorder, but it may become chronic. So sprain refers to injury to joint capsule, typically involving stretching or tearing of tendons and ligaments. Unfortunately, both these structures have much poorer regenerative power than bone, and once stretched, they become weak. Sprain is often considered as minor disorder, but it may become chronic. Arthritis or aching joints, it is the inflammation of joints. Okay. There are different types of arthritis. It is a common disease of old age, very important. Its common symptoms are pain, stiffness in the joints. Person, he or she complains that a constant mild stabbing pain remain in the region of swelling of that particular joint. Okay, so pain, stiffness, swelling. It has many forms. Three more common forms are described here: osteoarthritis, degenerative arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, there are some more types of arthritis like gouty arthritis or gout. So first we will discuss about osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis, the secretion of lubricating synovial fluid between the bones at the joint stop. It may can be a autoimmune, in which antibodies are formed against the synovial fluid. The smooth cartilage covering the ends of the bones at the joint stops forming, means the articular cartilage, and started to destroy. The smooth cartilage covering the ends of the bones at the joint wears out. It gets dissolved, reabsorb out due to the years of use, and is replaced by uneven bony spores. Bony flakes means spine, कांटे की तरह. The joint becomes inflamed, swelled up. Its movement becomes painful. Its movement becomes painful, and its function is diminished. Secretion of lubricating synovial fluid between the bones at the joint stops. The smooth cartilage covering the ends of the bones at the joint stops. The smooth cartilage covering the ends of the bones at the joint becomes, chipped off due to the years of use, and is replaced by uneven bony spurs, okay, or spikes. The joint becomes inflamed, swelled up, its movement becomes painful, and its function is diminished. Such as stiffness or fixation of joint is called ankylosis. Very important. such as stiffness or fixation of a joint, is known as ankylosis. The condition of osteoarthritis is more or less permanent. It is more or less permanent. It is common in old persons, mainly affecting weight bearing joints. Mainly affecting weight bearing joints. Then comes the rheumatoid arthritis or RA. It is a chronic painful inflammation and it is a autoimmune disorder. Confirmed. Of the synovial membranes of many joints simultaneously. It usually starts in the small joints in the hand and progress in centripetal and symmetrical manner. Okay. So RA or rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic painful inflammation of the synovial membrane of many joints at a time simultaneously. It usually begins at the small joints and then move in a centripetal progression and symmetrical manner. In several cases, it eventually results in crippling deformities, very important. Crippling deformities. There may be another manifestation such as fever. Crippling deformities mean the person starts to shake his or hand or any type of or any long bony part where the long bones are there. Okay, they starts to shake the moment he or she grabs some any stuff which is having heavy weight. Okay, so crippling deformities. There may be another manifestation such as fever, anemia, loss of weight, and morning stiffness. The rheumatoid arthritis involves erosion of joints. It usually starts at the age of 20 to 40 years, but many begin at any age. It affects the women more other than the men. Okay, rest and exercise under medical advice. Okay, may give relief. So rheumatoid arthritis, it is an autoimmune antibodies against streptococcal toxin attack which attack synovial membrane. Okay, so in rheumatoid arthritis, basically there is a streptococcal attack. Okay, autoimmune antibodies against. Okay, then comes gouty arthritis or gout. It is because of the accumulation of uric acid. It is an inherited disorder of purine metabolism. Disorder of purine metabolism occurring especially in men. Body forms excessive amounts of uric acid and the crystals of sodium urate are deposited in the synovial joints, give rise to severe arthritis. It generally affects only one or two joints only. It is very painful, particularly at night, and makes movement difficult. Redness and tenderness may be noticed in and about the affected joint. Gout generally affects the great toe. Occurrence of gout is related to diet. Persons suffering from gout should avoid meat. There is no protein diet should be reduced, or one should be better to take as a precaution way. Okay, as a precautionary measure, he or she should not go for the high proteinaceous diet. Persons suffering from gout should avoid meat. There is no cure of arthritis. However, pain relieving or analgesics, painkillers, drugs are available to give comfort. So this is the gouty arthritis because of the high levels of uric acid, because of disorder of purine metabolism. Then comes osteoporosis, in which bones are, in this disease, bones are easily fractured. The simple meaning of osteoporosis is basically the cells osteocytes, they are not going to form now, they are not going to lay down the calcium and phosphate and other hydroxyapatite crystals for the calcification of bone. The bones, they become very weak, fragile, and they can easily be fractured. Osteoporosis is reduction in bone tissue, bone mass decreases, causing weakness of skeletal strength. It results from excessive reabsorption of calcium and phosphorus from the bone. The resorption of calcium and phosphorus from the bone lead to bone, dried up, or we can say weak. the relative greater loss of trabecular bone than of compact bone. So osteoporosis mainly involves the loss of more trabecular bone than compact bone. This leads to vertical compression or crush fracture of the vertebrae, which consists primarily of trabecular bone, and the fracture of neck of the femur, which has considerable trabecular bone. Okay. So this leads to vertical compression or crush fracture of the vertebrae, which consists of primarily of trabecular bone, and fracture of neck of femur, which has considerable trabecular. Okay, so this is osteoporosis. Osteoporosis occurs in postmenopausal women. Okay, so if a woman is 40, fertile female, if a female she turns up 40 and if she is fertile with no menopause, that is why it is written. Osteoporosis occurs in postmenopausal women and elderly men. It may result from defective intestinal calcium absorption and menopause. Possible environment factors include smoking. So smoking precipitate the osteoporosis, then excessive drinking and decreased exercise. Osteoporosis is more common in women than men and in older than in middle-aged persons. So this is osteoporosis. Due to absence of estrogen, female may develop osteoporosis after menopause. Okay, absence of estrogen, females develop osteoporosis after menopause. Okay, menopause. The main reason why it happens because estrogen decreases osteoclastic activity. In females, estrogen decreases. Okay, dislocation is the displacement of bones from their normal position at a joint, for instance, slipping out of the ball of one bone from the socket of another bone into which it is fitted. Dislocation is accompanied by pulling or even tearing of the ligaments. Dislocation also tends to become chronic. Slip disc. Slip disc is the displacement of vertebrae and the intervertebral fibrocartilage disc from their normal position. It may result from the mechanical injury or defects of ligaments holding the vertebrae together. The slip disc is the displacement of vertebrae and intervertebral fibrocartilage disc from their normal position and may result from mechanical injury or defects of ligaments holding the vertebrae all together. Fracture is a break of bone. Fracture occurs rarely in children. The bones of the children have large quantity of organic matter and rare, therefore very flexible and less likely to break. With advancing age, mineral matter like calcium phosphate is deposited in the bones. This decreases the organic matter, making the bones hard and brittle. Thus, old bones are more liable to fracture of bones. And there are different fractures. Okay, we don't have to go to that level. Okay, body muscles. In body, all the multicellular animals they have muscles. The movement of the body takes place by these muscles. If the muscles become weak, the functioning of the body becomes difficult. The muscles are capable of contraction and relaxation, hence these are elastic. A muscle can pull a part of the body by its contraction, that is shortening. It cannot push that part by relaxation or elongation. Okay? A muscle can pull a part of the body by its contraction, that is shortening. It cannot push that part by relaxation or elongation. Hence, the muscles are typically arranged in antagonistic opposing pairs like flexion extension, pronation supination, adductor abductor. One muscle moves the body part in one direction by its contraction, and the other muscles move the body part in opposite direction by its contraction. Of course, when one muscle contracts, its opposite muscle relaxes. The principle of antagonistic muscles is true for both vertebrate as well as invertebrates. Animal movements depend upon interaction of muscles and skeleton. Action of body muscles. As mentioned above, the body muscles are arranged in antagonistic or opposing pairs. One muscle of a pair moves a body part in one direction and the other in the opposite direction. For example, the muscles named biceps brings the forearm towards the upper arm, and the muscle called triceps moves the forearm away from the upper arm. Okay. When the biceps contracts to cause movement, the triceps relaxes to allow the movement to occur and vice versa. Similarly, pairs of opposing flexors and extensors occurs at the wrist, ankle and knee. The type of movement that results from the contraction of a muscle depends entirely upon the way of muscle is attached to the levers of the skeleton. Okay. Classification of body muscles. According to the type of motion they cause, muscles are divided into following types. The muscles that act together to produce a movement are called synergistic muscles. And the muscles that act in opposition are called antagonistic muscles. The muscles that act most powerfully during any given movements are called prime movers. The muscles that act most powerfully during any given movements are called prime movers. Flexors and extensors. Muscles that bend one part over the other joint is called flexor. Extensor muscle is antagonistic of flexor muscle. The contraction of the extensor muscles a joint by pulling one of the articulating bone apart from other. So flexor and extensors, they are antagonistic functions. Pronation, supination. The contraction of pronator muscles rotates the forearm to turn the palm downwards or backwards. Supination is antagonistic of pronator. Supinator contracts to rotate the forearm and thus to make palm face upwards or forwards. Abductor and adductor. An abductor contracts to draw a bone away from the body midline. Muscle that brings the limb away from the midline is called abductor. An adductor, vice versa. Okay. Abduction is elevation and adduction is depression. Abduction is also known as elevation, okay, and adduction is also known as depression. So abductor muscles contracts to draw a bone away from the midline. Muscle that brings the limb away from the midline is called abductor. Adductor draws a bone towards the body midline. Muscle that brings the limb towards midline is called adductor. So adduction is medial movement towards midline of the body. Abduction is to move the limbs away from the midline of the body. Okay. Abductor muscles is antagonistic to adductor muscles. Abduction is elevation and adduction is depression. Okay. Pronation, protractor and retractor. Okay, it is for mandible, jawbone. Protractor muscle pulls the lower jaw, tongue and head forward. Retraction is opposite to protraction. Protraction means if you slide or glide your lower jaw, okay, to come forward, to come forward. When I am making that, that's why my voice is getting modulated. Okay. Retraction muscles draws the lower jaw, tongue and head backward. Inversion and eversion. Okay, you can see this is retraction and this is protraction. Inversion and eversion. Turning of the feet so that the soles face one another is inversion. Okay, and eversion is the opposite of inversion. In this movement, the soles of the feet face laterally. Rotation. Rotation is the term that indicates the partial revolving of the body, and circumduction is the complete movement of ball and socket joint of humerus. Erector. It helps to raise the hairs of skin. Goose flash. Elevator, which elevates the part of the body. Depressor, which lowers the part of the body. So elevator is which elevates the part of the body. Depressor, which depresses the part of the body. Agonist, opposed in action by another muscle. Agonist, they are opposed by another muscles. Antagonist counteracts the action of each other. Sphincter closes the natural orifice or passage. Constrictor causes contraction or squeezing. Okay. So agonistic, opposed in action by any other muscle. One. An antagonist, it counteracts. We know that it counteracts the action of another muscle. Now there are some important facts you have to remember. Amphibian and mammalia has dicondylic skull, and reptiles. Birds has monocondylic skull. Amphibians and mammals, they have dicondylic skull, very important. When we talk about humans, they have their jaw suspensorium is craniostylic. Okay, because the jaw is attached to the cranium. Amphibians and mammals, they are dicondylic skull, they have dicondylic skull. Okay, and reptiles and birds are monocondylic skull. Sella turcica is found in the base of sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone is butterfly shaped bone. This is a depression in the skull which loses or which acquires or holds pituitary gland. Sella turcica is found in the base of sphenoid bone, which is butterfly-shaped bone. It is a depression in the skull which loses the pituitary body. Ethmoid bone having a cribriform plate with crista galli, triangular process. Crista galli serves as a point of attachment for meninges that cover the brain. So ethmoid bone having a cribriform plate with crista galli, which is a triangular process. Crista galli serves as a point of attachment for the meninges to cover the brain. Sphenoid bone is also called keystone bone of cranial floor because it articulates with all other cranial bones. Very important. Sphenoid bone, it articulates with all other cranial bones. That is why it is known as what? Keystone bone of cranial floor. Tail vertebrae of birds is pygostylic, pygostyle, urostyle present in caudal regions of frog. Pygostyle is the tail vertebrae of the birds and urostyle is present in the caudal region of frog. Hamstring muscles, they are semi-tendinous, semi-membranous, biceps femoris. In players, this muscle gets under stretching during exercise or heavy or rigorous exercise. Calf muscles, they have gastrocnemius muscles, which is known as what? Shank muscle. Okay. Calf muscles, gastrocnemius, which is also known as shank muscle. And shank bone, they are tibia and fibula. So my dear students, we have completed the osteology part, the bone part in locomotion and movement. In the next turn, we will be starting with the physiology of muscles, their functioning, their movement. Till then, bye bye, take care, stay safe, stay healthy.